welcome to the second episode of Dude, Where's My Soul? We have a surprise guest. There's another James. I don't really know anything about him. Yeah. Do you wanna introduce yourself in the like strangest way you're comfortable with?
Strangest way I'm comfortable with. Well, I've known the other James, my twin James here, for well over 20, almost 30 years, I think. And we've, I guess, come on a very remote, not quite romantic, but friendly getaway into one of the remote parts of Wales to do some spiritual searching, amongst other things. That's pretty much why I'm here today. Yeah.
Mm. And you decided or were convinced to join the podcast?
I'm somewhere between convinced, instructed, and asked politely, I guess.
It's kind of happened.
Right.
David, remind me of that way that you ask people to describe food.
I ask people to describe food by like keep it a secret whether or not you like the food. Just like tell me about your experience.
Tell me about your experience of being James Cole, but without talking about whether or not you like it.
Experience of being James Cole.
And if you think you are James Cole,
who knows anything? I haven't known what's been going on for quite some time, I guess. Being James Cole has been quite a roller coaster of a ride over the years. There we go. It's had its ups and downs.
No, that's a bit like whether you like it or don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, sure, ups and downs. I won't say where it nets out overall, but yeah.
And what is your for our opening segment? What's your current quality of consciousness? Do you feel like drowsy? Like does it feel unreal around you? Do you feel grounded, paranoid?
I think this is a very surreal situation. I mean, it's there's a little bit of what's it called? Sort of like cognitive tension, maybe a lack of ease, opening up and kind of answering questions that aren't, normal sort of straightforward icebreaker interactions.
Aren't they?
Not in the world I'm kind of used to existing in.
No, don't worry. This is. I mean, this is definitely a world, but this is our world. It's not. Questions. Describe the experience of being yourself without keeping it a secret whether you like it. I don't think anyone's probably ever said that sentence before.
They've certainly not said it to me or asked me. Certainly not on a podcast either.
How about you? The being I choose to refer to as soulfish, but I'm open to being corrected.
My quality of consciousness. I don't want to give these shallow answers to this question, you know. Good, yeah. I feel present. I feel at home. There's a really strong home in this place. It's, I feel like I got a real domain. I feel, because we're living in this little house, and we really own this entire house. It's separated from everywhere else. There's no neighbours. It's like it's a cabin in the back of this farm, but we're not in a room. We've got the whole house. We can just do whatever we like. We can even make noise that no one's going to hear. I have with my good friend James Cole, I have very good synergy, so I feel very, very comfortable having him around. And I've got got a lot of food. There's an abundance of food very close at hand. Got my bed. Perfect. And there's no dead zones either. The house is it's the perfect size actually. There's no places which I just kind of tape off and never go into. Everything has its own use.
Sounds like your consciousness and the house is kind of fused.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I went off on a bit of a tangent there about the sense of home. That's what I was talking about, the house.
Yeah, it's an important sense.
Anything else in my consciousness? No, it's good. Yeah, there's a kind of edginess about doing these strange, unusual things. Making a podcast, saying, "Hey, just be on the podcast." Yeah.
I mean, the last time we talked about like what's the name of a 2-person cult, and now like we've recruited one more.
Oh yeah, as my cult's growing all the time.
Yeah.
Surrender, then I just need to move into some surrender. I think I'm quite surrendered. Not as much as actually, not hugely surrendered. When I notice an uncomfortable feeling, it often triggers me to surrender. That's my initiation response. That's a good idea. Instead of trauma responses, have initiation responses, which is whenever something triggers you, you make the most powerful choice you possibly can.
How do you define an initiation? It's something I hear a lot about in various spaces.
There's different meanings of initiation, but one that I kind of picked up that I like is it's like you think of a trauma, right? A trauma is a certain event or series of events that instills a very contracted pattern of behavior in you, whereas an initiation is something that instills expansion in you. So it's like a trauma, but it makes you expansive rather than contracted.
So it's a sort of powerful event echoing into the future.
Exactly.
But with the other polarity.
So if you do rituals, the aim is actually to create a powerful event that changes and affects you, but in an expansive way. And of course, there's a risk that people get re-traumatized or whatever. But the purpose is to create like an anti-trauma.
Do any of you want to ask me about my quality of consciousness?
I would love to know about your quality of consciousness, since you've heard a brief excerpt from me and a detailed one from my partner here. So please go for it.
Yeah. I feel a certain lack of control because there was another person joining. I like it, and I fooled myself into thinking like I'll appear prepared this time, and I've like made some notes. But yeah, this changes everything. I think it's a very good. It's a very good image for life. Just like my current setup here. I have the cat that wasn't really in frame last time. It's here, sort of whispering straight into my ear, and I'm also wearing something to cover my ear, so I can't hear all of the wisdom. This feels like a profound image for something. Yeah, no. Like I wouldn't say panicky, but like there's a slight, yeah, the sense of lacking control is still very strong. I'm also tense, and I'm noticing the smell of my scented candle, which I haven't really put on.
Oh, very nice. We have a scented candle on our altar. Let's have the traditional podcast candle lighting ceremony.
Roughly once every 10 weeks, I talk to people about the effect of lighting a candle. But right now, I'm actually noticing what because we did the first couple of minutes without any candle nearby, and now I have one in my field of vision, and it's really done regulating. Also, yeah, I have to ask you, Soulfish, is having James around more or less down regulating than having two cats around?
Yeah, it's very down regulating. It's extremely down regulating.
More than the
down
cats?
Regulating is a word that we mean like relaxing.
I mean, I had actually interpreted that in completely the opposite, more sort of, I guess, literal sense of regulating, because I guess if you talk about control and schedule, like, we're definitely there's an influence on each other in terms of maintaining routines that I think maybe I wouldn't stick to in the same way. So, like the we have a sort of a schedule to stick to an extent. We have a the morning ritual of meditation that takes place shortly after 7 a.m., followed by exercise time to sort of strengthen the body and be good for the soul and prepare for the day. I don't know if I would be strict about these things by myself without someone there, and that's what I thought you meant by regulating. So in terms of relaxing, I know you were asking Soulfish here rather than me, but vice versa. Yeah, regulating in that sense, it's also regulating.
Yeah, this is part of the reason why I do this. Yeah, I find being with another person, I guess it depends on the person, very regulating. So I got kind of burnt out and traumatized by computer work, and so a big part of this is being able to move back into that with a more higher degree of regulation.
The synergy is important too, that you mentioned before. If we were at odds in terms of how we wanted to conduct things, I don't think it would work quite so well. I think the vision is shared to an extent. It's good from that point of view.
We have very good synergy. I have good synergy with David as well. You know, things just kind of, like when I was in the community experience in Peru, it was just like constantly arguing about like, oh, who's going to cook and what and like what time and like why aren't you helping, blah, 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 blah. But like when you have synergy with someone, everything just kind of happens.
Yeah, I don't remember interpersonal conflict. I remember a lot of sort of competing voices in me, especially sort of during sessions. It's like the time when like the different voices in me get to argue. But like with you, it's just like it feels like there is no ego to push against, which was a very strange experience for me. Also like strangely comforting and a little bit eerie at the same time. Did you listen to the previous episode, James?
You're going to have to be. Oh, he's James. I'm sorry.
I think that was
he's James.
to me.
Yes.
The answer is no. If you'd ask,
did I send it to you?
No.
I thought it might blow his mind too much.
If you'd asked me just then, was I aware that there'd been a previous episode, I also would have said no. I've dialed into a session without having a clue what I was dialing into. But I mean, honestly, that's not a bad thing, and I always have an idea with this guy what I'm sort of roughly diving into, and I'm prepared to do it. It's a nice thing to kind of just be thrown into something unprepared and not know anything about it and pick it up on the spot.
I didn't do it consciously, but it just makes it. It's just everything is more authentic. Like I'm very against planning and preparation and understanding. Just want to see like the real thing.
And I mean, you also, James, you've known this creature for, you said, like close to 30 years.
That's correct.
I met him this summer, and I've only met him in the sort of the current, the last couple of sort of iterations of personality or lack of personality. How would you describe this being 30 years ago? And what happened to him? And do you think it... Yeah, I'll stop there.
There's been substantial change and shift in kind of mindset and spiritual awareness. Personality wise, there's things under the hood that certainly he hasn't changed. It's a mixture. The creature sat next to me, as you'd say, it's probably one of the smartest and wittiest creatures I've ever known, actually. It's kind of one of the things that, like, you know, I'm drawn to being in his circle as a friend. It's one of his strongest net positive characteristics. But 30 years ago, growing up, I think that the spiritual side had been completely untapped. So I've seen on that side of things a remarkable change. And there have been periods over that 30 years where we've not been in touch. Make that clear.
The majority.
In fact, yeah, the majority, you're right. We've been in touch, I think, for just over a year, maybe. Something like close to that. And that was probably the first time within, if not 5 years, maybe close to a decade. So I guess if you're not staring at, a clock's hands as they're ticking in real time, but you check up on something much later, the changes are more stark.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very it's good that you say this about the wittiness, because I've always wondered, like, I found Soulfish like very entertaining, and I'm never sure if it's like, is it on purpose, and is it okay to laugh, and I now feel like it is slightly more than before, I think.
I laugh all the time, and I see where you're coming from. There's a kind of like a dry, almost deadpan side to it, where it never comes across as not clear whether it was intended, and sometimes that's not even clear 30 years later. But the fact that I've not been ostracized for laughing, I'd take that as a good sign. And
yeah, Yeah, there's like something about being like a sort of dry, deadpan, like funny, mystic, sort of delving into the spiritual realm, but not like taking on this like super serious, like it's only like this combination of spirituality and humor. I find very liberating, and it's reflected in the title of the podcast. I'm I'm not sure there are other, or I'm not aware of other sort of things like other media like trying to be this light in tone. I'm not sure. Well, is it light? We haven't really set the tone yet. I'm noticing that like so far we mostly talked about the person we both know, and I'm like I had kind of had prepared a topic for today, and like do we go into that, or do we just flow? If you were a guest, James, if you were a guest on a podcast episode that had a kind of lightness to it, but also like a spiritual leaning, what would you want the episode to be about?
Oh, it's so confusing. You keep saying James. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, it means to me. What I wanted to be about, a light-hearted spirituality conversation. If not discussing ourselves and our places in the world and our consciousness of our feelings and our surroundings, I'm not sure what else I would suggest really. So, all I will say is if you have a topic prepared, I would say crack on. I will do my best to keep up.
Then let's launch into it. I imagine the title of this episode to be "What Even Is Soul?" I mean, I'm co-hosting this with a guy who calls himself Soulfish, and until quite recently, I didn't really have much of a connection to this word, and like wondering about its relevance in the current world, and also maybe starting with like what does soul mean when like in the mind of Soulfish?
What does soul mean? So I can explain this, and obviously there's different meanings and different ways of models that you could have. But so you have a personality, you have a character that you created to try and make other people react in a good way towards you. I say you, I have a character I've created to interact with the world, and I have various parts of that which are more deliberate and various parts of that which are unconscious and less deliberate. But this character is a very shallow construction, and it's possible to strip that away. And there's something underneath. There's something underneath with its own intelligence and its own power, and it's a very deep, authentic place. And that's, once I strip away the personality, that's what I find is the soul.
I've tried sort of summing it up as like the soul is what's left when you stop doing your patterns and telling yourself stories about who you are.
Yeah. I got a good transmission from Bruce Lyon about this in New Zealand. And and there's all these identities, like I'm a even these things of like gender, like I'm a man, I dress in a certain way, but like that's not inherently me. That's just something I do. Or you have like a sexuality, but it's just something that you do. Or all these things, like just things that you do. Like I have this job. They're not me. They're not me. And there's something underneath.
Why do we need this this term in our time? Like, should the average person in the street know or care about like soul in this sense, or is this something like a like philosophical hobby things for people with like special interests? Should society like talk more about this sense of soul and this idea of the personality as like the things you do to, I guess, like to like yourself and to make other people like you?
The thing is, it is a model, and it's a model that isn't going to work for everyone. Like some people find it very easy to like imagine themselves as like a kind of a ghosty spirit or something. Some other people might want to talk more about the unconscious, or their authentic selves, or their fully actuated self. So it is just one model for people who kind of like that flavor. But should is a, I'm not really sure what should means.
Should as in
I heard
to would I think probably not be the way to go. But I mean, even if there are people in society who wouldn't subscribe to that particular model, and maybe they think of the soul in more literal terms, and whether they believe it or not, I mean, understanding the soul in some kind of context is surely key to understanding who you are as a person, what makes you tick, what makes you happy, what makes you content, what drives you in all aspects of life. And that surely should be one of the most important aims of anyone, fundamentally, to be in tune with that and to understand it. The context and the model may differ.
When you talk about it, it sounds like the soul has preferences. When Soulfish speaks, I'm not so sure if the soul sort of wants things. Does it?
That's yeah. I think you overloaded me a bit with that question. The metaphor got stretched a bit thin. But yeah, I definitely have. I've moved from a place of personality much more into a place of soul, and also I've moved into a place of not wanting. Is that exactly the same as soul? I can describe my experience and I can label that as soul, but sometimes it's difficult to say like define this about soul, because that it's not really clear. I can't work the other way back, like take the word and and find the meaning.
I guess it's like slightly.
I operate more on like callings. There's just things that just like feel like that's the thing that's going to happen, rather than I want this. I have this image in my mind of this thing that I want, and then I have to make the world bring me that thing. But is that the same as soul?
It sounds more like stopping. I mean, you mentioned last time like surrendering to life, like stop trying to control life. It sounds like it's a while since you stopped trying to make things happen. Like you've gone with the flow for some time now.
But the spiritual journey is very much it's like a journey and a process that happens, and different things fall away and different things arise throughout the journey, and I can identify those things that are falling away and arising. But like, is any one of those a property of soul? I don't know. That's confusing
me. I'm guessing a different way of asking, or like getting at your what clicked for you when you got like this model of the soul? Like it gave you something that you didn't have before.
The model.
No. Yeah, like this way of thinking about the soul. It's like, oh, that's where I want to go.
No, it's always the other way around. Actually, it's debatable how useful these models are, because I hear the model, some crazy guy is telling me this model, and I have no fucking clue what you're talking about. And then I experience it, and I'm like, oh, this is what he was talking about. But I can never, because the experiences are so fundamentally different to anything that I can relate to before, I can't understand the experience before I experience it. And then I can give it a name.
Hmm. I remain sort of somewhat agnostic to this whole thing. Can you like help me determine if I've ever been sort of close to like peeking below the layer of personality? I have a feeling that I haven't been to this space that you describe.
It's possible, but you could be close and not necessarily know. I mean, the finale of the level 1 is a good good place to try it. That's what did it for me. Let's see, but just the experience of the falling away of these, starting to see the world in a different way, the falling away of these wants, the falling away of these identities. I think instead of like really believing that like I am this, thinking, well, people can call me that, I guess. I kind of act like that, but I mean, I am not that. And it actually suddenly makes sense to me that I am not that. And the same with wanting. It's like feeling like, well, I used to have this experience of like I said, how I describe wanting, of this image that I'm trying to create into the world. And now I'm like, well, actually, I'm not making decisions on that basis anymore.
I remember maybe 12 years ago, I was lying on the couch of a psychoanalyst and talking about something. And she suddenly says, I have this, like, you keep talking about this character and you're convinced that you are this character. And I don't perceive, like, the person you're talking about, I don't perceive him anywhere around this room. She was kind of pointing out the story I was projecting about like someone, and I think it was the first time someone sort of pulled the rug under my entire like the thing that I've tried to build, and just today I heard someone else say like I'm really scared to let go of this castle of air. She described it as like I know I'm not the person that like I've made this fancy story that I'm a person sort of without shame. I don't really think that's true, and I found this very interesting. And I'm guessing it's related like this divide that you paint between personality and soul, and personality is the story, the habits, the patterns. That, I mean, from the psychology side, I've been trained to think of personality as the relatively stable traits. Like if you are super extroverted, you will probably keep being that way throughout life. Or if you're very, very sort of altruistic and generous, you'll probably stay that way. And yeah, this way of thinking about personality sort of clashes with this model you present, with like personality is just your ways of, it's a psychological defense, really. Like personality is the way you act to make something uncomfortable go away.
I think there's slightly different uses of the word. I don't know who studied, but there's probably some famous scientist who studied this personality in psychology. But this, yeah, well, you've already defined the way I'm using personality very well, and it's a bit of a different definition.
How do you view emotions? Are they like a property of the personality, or do they come from like the deeper level?
Well, yeah, they're not a property of the personality, because you can't just construct emotions. You can't just like choose to dress to be a certain emotion.
No, there's something very sort of raw and real shining through, and personalities, or like the defense part, is mostly sort of stopping the emotions from coming out.
Yeah, when you have if I have a dysfunctional personality, then it's not going to be in alignment. I'm not going to have to work with my emotions. I'm getting triggered by my own emotions. I'm not expressing them in the right way. They're getting stuck. They're just running round and round. But there's also, I say my emotions, there's a deeper level at which the emotions are just kind of there. They're not like property. They're not even properties of me or something I have. I had a bit of a communication with the soulfish entity, and I asked the soulfish entity what it thought about emotions, and it perceives emotions as these kind of clouds in the ocean, and it just swims through them. And so it all sorts of emotions it experiences, but they're just something it passes through. They're not related to it. They're just experiences that it passes through that have their own location.
I always thought of emotions as being internal feelings that you yourself, the soul, whatever, were not in control of necessarily, but the personality, whether it's a defense mechanism or otherwise, is more like a reaction to it. But I think I've since adjusted that view, because there are times where an emotion can certainly form or bubble up as a response to anything going on externally, but how you choose to react or handle or cope or manage or whatever response you have to it can also affect the level of that emotion as well. You can suppress an emotion and choose to not acknowledge it, and the emotion will bubble up and it will form and it will grow and it will expand. Or you can choose to embrace it, or you can choose to use it, acknowledge it, deal with it. And you might find that, if you're experiencing extreme anger or extreme happiness or joy or sadness by something, you could certainly able to exacerbate or control. Not just handling internally. If you're experiencing that and not showing it to the outside world, you're shielding other people from what you're feeling inside, but you can also diminish or expand on a particular emotion by doing that at the same time. So it kind of, I changed my view on that ultimately.
There's something sort of raw bubbling up, and then the expression of it is sort of heavily filtered through the personality. And like usually what happens in our society is it's somehow blocked, I think, is my take.
Yes,
it's very common in a lot of situations, and there might be good or bad reasons for it, which again, whether they're good or bad might be subjective. But there's a lot of situations where emotions are not acknowledged, or not. There's an expectation for you to manage it without dealing with it and without bothering other people with them.
The personality
I've recently.
I was going to say the personality tends to interact very violently with emotions. There's this desire to control. It doesn't really work out.
That might be the default way of handling things, unless you're trained to deal with it otherwise.
Yeah, I like quite early in my sort of education as a psychologist, we had this this guy that he seemed quite wise to me, and he said like everything that we call like mental illness is really like different ways of not accepting what you really feel, different ways of like trying to control or like the various sort of ways of like contracting or avoiding or like not facing your emotions somehow. And to me, it seemed quite simplistic at the time, but yeah, as the years have passed, I'm like quite skeptical of the entire like disease model, like thinking of mental illness as disease in the same way as like cancer or like breaking your leg, or like that's not really a disease. But like I find myself like every time I give someone a diagnosis, I also tell them like I need to say that as I perceive you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Like I don't see a broken human. I see someone sort of handling the power bubbling up in them the best way they can, and it's creating some problems for you. And this diagnosis is a way of sort of acknowledging that like this is really troubling, but there's nothing wrong, there's nothing broken. In a way, there's nothing to be fixed. And yet my job is to help people like not really fix themselves, but sort of meet themselves, like be less ashamed or scared or avoidant of like facing whatever is alive in them.
You might consider that a fix in its own right.
Yeah. I mean, it is the only fix. I think like someone in the psychedelic scene is saying like the only real illness is thinking there's something wrong with you, and when you really get to the bottom of that, and it's like, yeah, no, this anger, like it's supposed to be there. It's supposed to help me. It's telling me something important, and I don't really need to suppress it, or this shame is like really the voice of like a parent, but it's not. It's a story. It's not really a truth about me.
There's a difference between experiencing some kind of suffering and interpreting that as a signal to change something, and making a judgment that something is wrong.
Yeah, but the society is very, very eager on the judgment part.
Mm.
We're talking on behalf of society. I don't know what society says.
Well, there's certain stories that you can see that are reinforced continually, and you just see them in large numbers of people. It can be easy to overgeneralize sometimes, but there are certain cultural stories and patterns that are indoctrinated into a large number of people that's quite easy to observe.
I in the last couple of months, I found myself like telling people ever more often that like it sounds like I've yeah it sounds like your family like interprets emotion as like a problem to be fixed. Like if someone is crying and let's say their 4-year-old daughter comes up and like does this make it better, mommy? My thinking is like this 4-year-old has a model of like crying is something that needs to be fixed. Instead of like this person like needs to cry.
I love it when someone's crying. I'm like, oh, that's good. Oh, they're moving their emotions. Oh, I'm so happy for them.
I think this is one of the sort of main things I've taken from ISTA. I think is this view of, and I mean it's yeah, just the general. I mean the rules are out there in the public. The idea of like if someone is crying, assume they're an adult and can take care of their own emotions, and they don't need you to like offer tissues or like get out of it. Like maybe they're like finally connecting to some pain and moving through it, and then like coming back into the world full of where the default assumption is sort of crying should be fixed, anger should be fixed, anxiety should be like not there.
I think to some extent, when people in the street would see someone crying, it's maybe a failure of some kind to process their own emotions of guilt or need to jump in and help fix the situation. And you know, the offering of a tissue might be a simple gesture, or it might be completely useless and unwarranted and unhelpful, but it probably serves to placate the own feeling of guilt in that person, whether it serves a purpose or not, in which case it sort of, in that sense, it's quite a selfish thing. And maybe society sort of indoctrinated that in people as much as it's indoctrinated people to feel the need to fix their own crying, just as an example.
And it's interesting. I also, I mean, I'm not against like comforting people who are crying, and I don't want to sort of I don't want to scold a 4-year-old, or like I don't want to like correct someone on trying to be a good person, but I think I want to be sort of in spaces where emotion is welcome. And
a sort of indoctrination that, you know, this person is crying, they need help, you should be offering help for them to deal with it rather than letting them process things in their own time. It's I guess that's the way in which we're programmed to an extent.
It happens all the time in conversations. People will be saying like, oh, you know, this thing happened the other day and I'm really sad about it. someone said that to me, I would just be like, oh, okay, that does sound sad. But then often people would be chipping and be like, oh no, it's no big deal, don't worry about it, cheer up. I'm like, no, wait a second, this person is processing something and you're telling them that they're wrong. It's terrible.
Yeah, don't be sad. It's weird instruction.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the other day I met someone who was like quite frustrated, and they were like, I just want to scream, and I was like, do it, and they're like, here, or like treating as a bit of a like joke or like weird suggestion, and like in my culture, like that's not that weird anymore. And when I say my culture, I'm pointing at myself, like it's only me here sometimes. But like it took some convincing, but the main trouble was like, but what will people think? I'm like, there might be people that can hear us, but if they can like come here and like solve their problem of like what's going on in this room, and like we're sitting here and we can like tell them like it's nothing, we're like expressing some emotions. And I feel like I'm yeah, I also like demonstrated the like shaking while you scream, or just like shaking in general. But I feel like somehow radicalized. It feels like a weird thing to do, and but it's, I mean, it works.
I do a lot of shaking and sighing in public, and people don't seem to be
shaking and what?
Shaking, sighing.
Yeah.
But people sighing, often people interpret that as boredom and frustration. They start apologizing. I go, and they, oh, I'm sorry, we'll get this done as soon as possible. But I haven't. I think if you do, if you act in an authentic way, even if you act in an unusual way, like you just start shaking. If it's just like, obviously it's logical for you to shake, no one really cares. Which I found interesting, because obviously there is this big aspect of feeling shame about it, and it's not being normal or
whatever. I also there were like two things mentioned last time where I feel like we might own an explanation. The first question, like you mentioned the last time, like you've fallen through the floor of Ista. What is Ista?
Just going to warn you, Dave, you're cutting out a little bit. But yeah, what is Ista? Ista is a gym for the soul. Ista is an organization. It puts on trainings in various retreat centers around the world. And they have a program where if you go there for the right reasons, you can drill through personality pretty fast.
That's succinct, and yeah. And also in the last episode, you mentioned like, oh, being in a house, like my own house, is quite lovely, because usually like I'm in a tree or something and someone's trying to stab me with a knife, and I just went but this is not what happened internally. Is this what your like day-to-day life looks like?
The tree knife incident, there was only one tree knife incident. So yeah, but often so I've been nomadic for quite a while now, and I'm often in a place where I'm just I'm in someone else's space, just kind of like clinging onto a branch, or like I'm in someone's room from the Airbnb, or in like the guest room of the farm. And yeah, and this is nice. This is nice as well in that sense. Although I am a little. I did say it was quite separate, but we are in the edge of the field of the farmer, because we're in the farmer's field. he's obviously got like a big house and a big farm, and we're kind of here.
He seems a lot friendlier than that dude in Peru, though, from what you mentioned.
Yeah. No, very nice guy.
Do you feel like telling the story of the tree knife incident?
Oh, the story is the tree knife incident.
Is there a story there?
I mean, you can always make up a story. I'll fast forward the part about everyone being in the void and getting manifested. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how to tell stories anymore. I was in a tree. I was living in a tree. My bedroom was like a mattress on a branch. And it was a bit weird, but it was I had my own branch. But not very much privacy, right? Because the branch is open to the world. And there was a guy there.
I'm trying so hard to figure out if this is an allegory or like a literal thing that happened.
Maybe both.
I'm sorry.
Like I say, 30 years later, it's still hard to tell. But anyway.
No, it's both. It's both. I mean, everything's an allegory, but it's also literally happened. And there was a man there who was very wounded. He'd obviously had a very difficult life. There was something inside him that wanted to love, and he tried to put this love on this kitten, but he wasn't very good at it, and so the kitten became terrified and was always fleeing from him. And then he would try and find the kitten. So if I lost a kitten, I would get like the food and go like, "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty," and he would get an iron bar and just go around smashing everything up trying to find the kitten. And I think this created a cycle of the kitten becoming more and more scared, which he wasn't quite conscious of, that it was actually him that was causing. It wasn't the kitten that was malicious in running away. It was him that was causing the kitten to run away. He seemed to almost be psychotic, because he thought I was hiding the kitten, and I was asleep, and he was starting smashing up parts of the tree near me, and I just couldn't be bothered with him. I was like, "No, go away, it's not here." Then he became convinced that I was hiding his kitten, and I was like, "No, I'm not. Please go away." Then he threatened to stab me. And I don't know if he was really going to stab me, but he did seem a bit, I think his bark was worse than his bite, but he also seemed psychotic. He also seemed like very unpredictable. Like, it was more that I was at that time worried about his lack of ability to make rational decisions, rather than he was really rationally intending to hurt me. And when I just packed up and left. And also, like, the other reason that I left at that time is that I didn't necessarily feel completely unsafe there, but that energy of being woken up in the middle of the night by a guy with a knife, it's just not an energy that I wanted to be in. It was dysregulating energy.
Yeah, it's not great bedroom material.
Yeah, I just didn't feel, but I didn't want to be there, and then I didn't want to find out what the next thing he was going to do was going to be. The next stupid thing he was going to do. I didn't want to find out what that was going to be. And as I left, he stopped me and he demanded to search my bag. the soul bag, actually, because he thought that I had like wrapped up the kitten and stuffed it into the bag. And then he was like, he couldn't work out how to open the bag, so he was like patting the bag down in case he could find the feeling of a live kitten. And this also confirmed the psychosis hypothesis that I was having, because that really doesn't make sense that I would have put a live kitten inside my stuffed up rucksack, and that he would be able to feel the kitten by patting the side of the bag. But I went to the police, and I thought I'll just tell them, because I think he's probably abusive to his family and stuff, and it's nice that they have that on record. But they actually wanted to do quite a lot of stuff, and they went back there with me just to like talk to him. I didn't really know what they were saying, but like when I was standing there with the police, he was staring at me, like looking into my eyes with a real pure hatred, but it was a very authentic look. It was very authentic. And so it was a really unique experience to experience with eye gazing with someone who was hostile, who was committed to the eye gaze, but they were also hostile to me personally. Whereas normally when your eye gaze is a person like, oh, they're like anxious and they want you to like them and stuff. This guy hated me, but he was completely committed to authentically staring at me.
Did you? It almost sounds like you enjoyed that last part, or like you got something out of it.
It was a great experience, yeah, and a unique experience, yeah. It's fascinating working with people who are hostile, but they don't want to work with you, so it's difficult to do it. It's difficult to set it up and control it.
Yeah. It also feels like it's like the story is like slightly too serious for the joke about like the soul bag having like very strong cat field energy. Like it doesn't feel funny to me, so I won't mention it. We do have a listener requested segment.
Okay.
The listener has requested a specific segment, and the segment is Soulfish has a question.
I have a question.
Yeah, the thing that happens in the segment is like you ask a question.
Ask a question to you?
Or to whoever, maybe to James.
It's because is this okay? The listener was saying maybe you're asking too many questions. I have a question.
I think you haven't asked the question
to the mystery
yet on the podcast.
Yes. I see. Well, it's because I'm surrendered to the mystery, and I have to have this question.
Or to ask a question of another human, maybe.
Yeah, fascinating.
I refuse to believe you've like stopped wondering about things completely. Like I've experienced you wondering about things, but it's also like why is it doing that thing? That's weird. But do you have a question that you're sort of interested to ask another human?
Fascinating. Yeah, I'm feeling really blocked from that. I don't know. I mean, once you start accepting things, you don't really wonder anymore. And there's something very personality about asking, where are you from? People always asking questions is like this. Oh shit! I've got to make this person talk. Got to make this. There's like, I'm just like sitting with someone having a great time in their field, and then you can just feel it rising up inside. They're like, the silence has been too long. But I just asked some stupid question.
It could be, asked in that sense, where someone's trying to just deal with the awkwardness that silence causes them. Or you could be asking it as an icebreaker if you've just met someone and you need to ignite a conversation. It's not so much that there was a silence that needed sorting out so much as things needed to progress. But often I find it doesn't really matter whether the question was as basic or inane or kind of superficial as where are you from, what do you do, etc. It's kind of the way in which the person then answers it, the tone in which they answer it, whether they give an answer that's a couple of words or a complete sentence, whether they elaborate further, whether they ask the question back. I feel it's that you learn a lot more from, and that sort of opens the window into that person's personality, emotion, soul, etc. All of those things, more so than the actual answer itself. So the question doesn't always have to be, deep. It might just be an opportunity for the receiver to expand on it.
I have a question for both of my co-creators. Why are you here?
I feel like starting.
Go for it.
I mentioned in the last episode, like the clear intentions are like wanting to document Soulfish's existence, having a reason to talk to him, and also like trying to like do something brave by like releasing something that feels personal into the public.
Now expand the definition of here. I've answered the question again, but with an expanded here. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Can we hear like James's narrow answer first?
Yeah. Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing I was going to say was expand on the kind of the vagueness of the question and say, well, did he mean here as in co-presenting this podcast right now, or did he mean here as in being in the world, and why as in what led to that happening? What are my theories on general human existence, or why as in more like what if you have been brought into the world for a specific purpose, what is that purpose? What makes you tick? What is it you think that you need to achieve?
Then I choose one.
And well, and then I kind of, what I was going to say is it kind of almost didn't matter what he meant, because the question was being asked of me without elaboration until he did elaborate and explain what he meant. It was more for me to choose and answer it how I wished, and you chose your route of starting off about why you chose to make the podcast, which is still, it's interesting, it's fascinating, it's it's an answer worth hearing. And then obviously we gather that you want more in terms of expansion of what here means.
Well, yeah, that's just, I've noticed that you've talked a lot about the question.
I've talked a lot about the question. I haven't given a single answer yet. Would you like me to answer in one of those contexts, or would you like me to just?
Yes, please.
Which context?
What's the most expansive here you can imagine that's where an answer still sort of resonates in you?
What's the most expansive here? I was going to start actually just ignoring the most expansive and starting with why am I here in the podcast? Well, obvious answer, because I was invited and said, would you like to join? But as I think I mentioned earlier, like I guess I could have said no, or I could have asked for more information on what the podcast was. And I think part of me felt like I didn't want to. I just wanted to like go, okay, I've been invited. I've been sort of almost like a challenge to come and step into this world that you're relatively unfamiliar with, and join in with broadcasting to other listeners. And I think that part of that kind of excited me a little bit. Like I didn't know what I'd be stepping into. I didn't know what we'd be discussing. So I think I chose not to ask for more clarification for pretty much that reason. It was interesting to me to see where this was going without kind of knowing what to expect in advance. And it is interesting. On the more expansive note, that's a question I've been sort of wondering for a very, very long time. Why am I here specifically? What is it that my purpose is in the world? And I don't know. is the honest answer. I don't think I've discovered that yet. I had some ideas when I was younger that, you know, I was going to be the best at doing this or that, or, you know, and yeah. Now, as time's progressed, and, you know, I think that my views have sort of maybe mellowed, attitudes changed a little bit. I've maybe not been so demanding on myself as to what I need to achieve, and I think I'm more geared towards finding what drives contentment than achievement. But in coming to that conclusion, I don't think I've fully answered that myself either. So I'm still searching. The answer I'm giving is I don't know. I feel like the nature of the answer has changed, but what the exact answer is unknown.
It's a very different and much deeper I don't know than before.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll throw it back to you.
Why am I in the expansive here? I feel like I could like say almost anything and have it like fit as the answer. Like for eating fruit is sort of feels equally valid as sort of reducing suffering in the world. Like gives me a nice feeling, so I'll like try to do that sometimes. It feels like a little bit too heroic still, but like there's something about like sort of like learning a little bit. Like I'm curious. That's a quality that I appreciate in myself, and I like want to learn stuff, and I mean I'm here. The morbid answer is like I'm here because I haven't ended my experience yet, and I don't intend to. So like something keeps me going, and I think there's yeah, that's a dark way of going. Like hearing the question as like, why haven't you killed yourself yet? But I feel this pull in me, and there is like there is a curiosity and a feeling of kindness, or like a strong desire to like somehow reduce suffering through being curious. And I think that's it's one of my favorite descriptions of the like profession I've chosen as well. And it's being it feels like very contaminated by this like want to be admired, to be clever. I feel like I have that from the generations above me. It doesn't feel mine. I find that the less I try to do, and the more I try to just be, the more good I do for the people around me. To a certain extent. I still feel like this question makes me sound like a hero, and I don't like that. But
what's interesting is your acknowledgement of that, though. Like, if your desire to ease suffering is there, that's not quite the same as saying, you know, what I do is I ease suffering and kind of bragging about it. It's kind of like it's acknowledgement that is a thing that is a driver for you, and to also be conscious of like the connotations of that and how you may be perceived by that is also quite sort of aware, perceptive, etc. And I just find it interesting because it's the opposite of kind of what I've mentioned, in that my journey has been through perhaps more selfish motivations of wanting to compete with others and wanting to be wanting to achieve. And it's almost not quite sort of, it's not gone fully the other way, but it's changed into something that's more to do with acceptance of a place in society and working with other people. Not quite the same as easing suffering, but it's less sort of self-driven.
I do also like perceive myself as like tremendously selfish. And but that feels more like a protective thing. Like I think my like current struggle in life is sort of making myself feel sort of safe and comfortable in my own company. And I think most of what I do that I perceive to be selfish is sort of about creating that, like trying to create a bubble that just feels like safety. Yeah, and I can tell that it doesn't really do me or anyone else any good. And I also notice that I keep defining myself in terms of how I affect other people, and in a way, I think like actually being able to sort of focus on my own contentment would feel quite wonderful. Yeah. It's a good question. I'm judging her question. I enjoyed your question. That's where
I'm curious, when someone asks a question like that, I wonder if they're asking because they know they have an answer that they'd like to share. I'm wondering if that was the case for you, or if selfish, or if that question was out of intrigue in general. I was wondering what is the answer to the question from you, and what was your driver for the question?
Yeah, I thought it was a powerful question to throw in. I recently applied for a particular shamanic training, and the facilitator of that shamanic training is very concerned that people be able to handle themselves. And one of the questions is, if you get triggered and defensive, what should we do to bring you back in? And my answer to that was, ask me why you're here. It was, and so there's different ways you could answer this question. But yeah, in that sense, my answer would be, if I was like, oh, I'd be okay. I'm here to show up. I'm here to show up for love.